without any further ado, I'd like to introduce the speakers for today. We're going to do monsters and Middleboxes. I'm introducing Gabby and Luke from Cloudflare. So please give them a warm welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for the little introduction, and thank you to everyone for sticking with us throughout the AV setup. Turns out it takes a lot of engineers to make AV work. And with that, let's get started. So, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today. And we're excited to share our work on detecting HTTPS interception and to show you the tools that we've built to detect the monsters in the middle we observe on Cloudflare's network.
So, hi everybody, I'm Luke Valenta. I'm a recent PhD graduate from the University of Pennsylvania, and I'm now a systems engineer on the Cloudflare cryptography team.
And I'm Gabby Fisher. I'm a recent master's graduate from Stanford University, and I'm also now a systems engineer at Cloudflare on the workers team. So today's talk will start with an overview of what HTTPS interception is and common sources of monster in the middle activity. Next, we'll cover a technique that we use to detect HTTPS interception on inbound traffic to Cloudflare's network. And then we'll end our talk by sharing the tools that we've built to detect HTTPS interception and observe these interception patterns on our global network. To make sure everyone is on the same page, let's quickly do an overview of how a monster in the middle could intercept HTTPS traffic. Let's start with the default case that a lot of us are familiar with, a normal HTTPS connection. Here, a client first performs a TLS handshake with a server, negotiates a shared symmetric key, and then transmits HTTP encrypted contents using the symmetric key. Before the client performs a TLS handshake, the server must prove its identity to the client by presenting its certificate, which is issued using the root certificate of a widely trusted certificate authority. Now, let's see what happens when a TLS connection between a client and a server goes through a third party. This third party in the middle is either hardware, called a Middlebox, or software called middleware. It sits between the client and the server, proxying traffic between a client and its intended destination, in this case, example.com. The Middlebox cannot read encrypted HTTPS traffic between the client and the server, since this traffic is encrypted with a symmetric key that only the client and server know because they are the only two to have negotiated it during the TLS handshake. If someone wanted to set up a Middlebox or middleware to intercept HTTPS traffic, the following setup is necessary. First, the Middlebox needs its own root certificate so it can issue its own certificates. If the interceptor wants to intercept traffic from the client to the example.com server, the interceptor can present its own issued certificate for example.com and try to trick the client into thinking that its certificate corresponds to the real one for example.com. The client would hypothetically perform a TLS handshake with the interceptor, not the end server, such that the interceptor could negotiate a symmetric key with the client and then be able to decrypt the client's traffic. This approach fails, however, because the client will not trust the interceptor's root certificate by default. Instead, a client would likely receive a warning, which says that the certificate that the Middlebox presented was not issued by a trusted root certificate, like that of a certificate authority. To prevent this warning from happening, someone seeking to intercept HTTPS traffic must make the client trust the interceptor's root certificate. This practice of getting the client to trust and install the interceptor's root certificate is the crux of most HTTPS interception practices. Now, the interceptor's self-issued certificate for example.com appears to be trustworthy, and the client will perform a TLS handshake with the interceptor, meaning that the interceptor can decrypt the client's HTTPS content. The interceptor typically then re-encrypts the client's content by performing a TLS handshake with the real server and re-encrypting the client's HTTP content when sending it to the server. Now, the Middlebox can inspect and modify the inner HTTP content between the client and the server without errors showing up on either end. Now that we know what HTTPS interception looks like, we're going to cover a few examples of these monsters in the middle commonly seen on the internet. Our first monster in the middle is this rather bureaucratic-looking one. It represents proxies like antivirus software and corporate or government proxies. These proxies have several goals, including protecting clients by detecting malware or command and control traffic, or protecting a corporation by detecting and preventing data exfiltration. These types of proxies also have a nefarious side and can be used to censor or spy on clients. Even when these middle boxes are meant to improve the security of connections, they can increase the attack surface of an HTTP connection. Some examples of this are vulnerabilities in Kaspersky, an antivirus software, and Blue Coat, one of the most popular corporate proxies. These proxies can also be used for malicious means. In recent news, the Kazakh government forced the Kazakh ISP to make clients install root certificates so that they could intercept HTTPS traffic to social media websites like Facebook. Kazakh ISPs encouraged users to install this root certificate by saying it would protect them from fraud or hacking attempts or illegal content. But really, this setup allows the Kazakh government to potentially spy on citizens' everyday online activity. Our next monster in the middle is this grifter over here. It represents adware or malware, and these intercept HTTPS connections to inject ads into web pages or even try to steal and exploit private data. One example of this is Search Awesome Adware. An especially well-known example of adware is Superfish, whose root certificate was shipped by default with many Lenovo devices. A third class of interceptors are poorly implemented and often unnecessary proxies that increase a connection's attack surface. Oops. Did that work? Let's try that. There we go. So an example of this I find really, oops. This is what happens when you have AV troubles right before you give a talk, but it will be fine. Cool. So a third class of interceptors are poorly implemented and often unnecessary proxies that increase a connection's attack surface. Any TLS terminating forward proxy, whether it's well-intentioned or not, risks leaving private information and opens the door to spoofing. An example of this I find really interesting is Sennheiser headphones, whose head setup software installed a root certificate on computers as part of a syncing protocol between headphones and computer. The private key for this root cert was weakly protected using the passphrase Sennheiser CC, so guessing it was almost as easy as 1, 2, 3, and literally rhymes with it. If an attacker learned this passphrase, they could use the root certificate's private key to issue fraudulent certificates for any website. So these headphones as bad software dramatically increase the attack surface of a customer's computer. A final type of HTTPS interception is through reverse proxies. Unlike other forms of proxies, reverse proxies don't require a client to install a new root certificate, since clients connect directly to the reverse proxy. Reverse proxies are usually deployed to improve the security, performance, and reliability of their customers' sites by providing features like load balancing and modern TLS. However, they're not also immune to vulnerabilities, as examples over recent years have shown. Cloudbeat against Cloudflare was one incident that had the potential to expose private customer data, and other major CDNs like Akamai and F5 have had their own share of incidents. Now that we have a good sense of the different types of monsters in the middle on the internet and the risks that they pose, Luke is going to explain how we actually can detect when HTTPS interception occurs. So with that, I'll hand this over.
Great, so now we'll describe how a server can detect when an incoming client connection may have been intercepted using a technique described by Durumaric and others in a 2017 paper. So in this example, we have a Chrome client connecting through a middle box to the server, and the middle box is using OpenSSL as their TLS library. To intercept the connection and read the plaintext HTTP content, the middle box acts as a server and terminates the TLS connection from the Chrome client. And then it establishes a new TLS connection using OpenSSL to re-encrypt the HTTP traffic to the server. The first thing to note is that Chrome's TLS library behaves differently than OpenSSL does. So from the server's perspective, it looks like an OpenSSL client is connecting to it. However, the inner HTTP contains a user agent header claiming that the traffic is originating from a Chrome browser. So if the server sees a Chrome user agent paired with an OpenSSL TLS connection, this is an indication that the connection might have been intercepted. So let's dive into these mismatched user agent headers and TLS parameters in depth. So we can easily fingerprint HTTP clients by reading and parsing the user agent HTTP header. So in this example, the user agent header indicates that the connection is from Chrome version 75, generated from Mac OS X Mojave. While this header can be spoofed by bots or other browsers, most popular browsers can be identified with this header. Identifying the TLS client behind a connection is a bit more challenging, since there's no field in TLS that identifies the library. However, there's been a great deal of work over the past decade in doing TLS fingerprinting based on the TLS client hello message. So RISC started looking at TLS fingerprinting a decade ago, and the state of the art has been improving since. So in 2015, Lee Brotherson collected and published hundreds of TLS fingerprints for various TLS clients. Blake Anderson and others at Cisco have done some really great work in automatically generating TLS fingerprints from data observed on Cisco's networks. And as of 2019, they've started publishing a subset of their observed fingerprints weekly. The JAW3 project from Salesforce developed a TLS fingerprint that was succinct enough to fit inside a tweet. And the TLS fingerprint project collects and publishes fingerprints from TLS clients connecting to the UC Boulder campus network. And they provide an easy interface for tracking clusters of fingerprints. So let's look at how all these methods fingerprint TLS clients. So RFC 5246 describes a typical TLS 1.2 handshake. So the client starts the handshake by sending the client hello message, which advertises the list of parameters that it supports and is willing to negotiate for the connection. The server responds with the server hello message indicating which parameters it chooses, along with its certificate and key exchange value. The client responds with its key exchange value and the finished message, and then both sides can send encrypted application data. So we're interested in TLS fingerprinting based on the client hello message. So let's see how that's structured. So this message contains fields including the client's protocol version, the set of cipher suites and cryptographic algorithms that it's willing to negotiate, as well as various extensions. So while some fields of the client hello are random, like the session ID and the client random nonce, many are static and they're never changed for a particular version of a TLS library. So we can use these fields to fingerprint implementations. So let's take a look at the fields of two client hello messages, one generated by Chrome and the other by OpenSSL. So if we look at the list of cipher suites sent by each client, we can see that Chrome sends 17 cipher suites and OpenSSL sends 48. The list of supported groups that they send are almost the same, but Chrome sends this extra value, the grease value, at the start of the list. A grease value is also prepended to the start of the list of cipher suites, if you notice. So Chrome sends these grease ciphers, which don't actually represent valid algorithms, to ensure that servers and Middleboxes don't break when they come across values that they don't recognize. So if we see a client hello message with these 17 cipher suites in this exact order, along with this set of groups and extensions with the grease cipher suite prepended to each list, then we can reasonably assume that it was generated by Chrome's TLS library and not by OpenSSL. So now that we know how TLS fingerprinting works, we can get to the HTTPS interception detection process. So the first step is to construct a database of known browser fingerprints. These can be constructed manually by operating both a client and a server, and then logging the connection parameters, including the HTTP user agent and the TLS fingerprint. Next, for an incoming request from a client, we can check if the user agent matches anything in our database. If not, then we can't say anything about whether or not the connection was intercepted, and we should collect more fingerprints. If we do have a match, then we can compare the TLS fingerprint of the request to the expected fingerprint in our database. If they match, then it's unlikely that we have a monster in the middle here. However, if the fingerprints don't match, then it's likely that either our fingerprint database is incomplete or outdated, or the connection was indeed intercepted, so we have a likely monster in the middle. We can go a few steps further and actually try to identify the responsible middle box too. So we're finally ready to talk about the tools that we built at Cloudflare for doing HTTPS interception detection. So we built an open source library written in Go for this purpose, which we call Monster in the Middle engine. Some of the initial goals we had when developing this project are first for it to be maintainable. So fingerprints in the database quickly go stale as browsers are updated, and it's time consuming to generate and vet new fingerprints manually. So we hope to be able to automatically generate fingerprints that we trust from connections observed from Cloudflare's network, much like Cisco's doing now. We also wanted the fingerprint format that we use to be flexible to model a variety of browser behavior. For instance, some implementations change the order of cipher suites based on available hardware on the device. So we'd like to capture that. We also plan to support alternative static TLS fingerprint formats like JAW3 and TLS fingerprint that are already widely adopted in the community. And we also wanted the library to be fast, so performance was a priority. So we wanted to be able to deploy it at scale. So, and we actually showed that we can do this by deploying it on a 5% sample of TLS client hellos on Cloudflare.
So this probably makes you wonder, okay, what is Cloudflare seeing when it comes to HTTPS interception on the public internet? So aggregating data from this 5% traffic sample, we've also exposed a public dashboard that gives insight into the practice of HTTPS interception as observed by our network. This dashboard is called Malcolm, which technically stands for Measuring Active Listeners, Connection Observers, and Legitimate Monitors. But really, this is low-key a chance for us to reference our favorite 2000s family sitcom with Bryan Cranston. This dashboard allows for filtering over a number of fields, including browser, operating system, and the type of HTTPS interception tool out of those that we've been able to identify. So let's see some examples of this dashboard in action.
So here we show the overall HTTPS interception rates from the traffic sample over a 30-day period. So the orange shows the percentage of traffic that we do believe has been intercepted based on our heuristics. So this shows that just about 17% of traffic has been flagged. The green shows traffic that we do not believe to be intercepted, and the blue shows traffic that we're not sure about because our fingerprint database is incomplete or out of date. So you might be wondering about this large spike that you see here. So this is actually from when I updated the reference browser fingerprints that we're using in our production database. And then the gradual increase of the blue bar as time progresses shows that our fingerprint database is going out of date. So we have more and more unknown. So making these updates automatic is a big to-do for this project, so that we plan to do soon. Our dashboard also allows for filtering by fields like browser and operating system. So here in this video, we're going to first filter by traffic that we do believe to be intercepted, and then we'll see the breakdown of intercepted connections with a Chrome user agent. We see that out of all the Chrome traffic, Android and Windows phones tend to have the most intercepted traffic. And you can also clear the filters and start a new investigation of HTTPS interception, so we encourage you to check out the dashboard. And we plan to add more features to the dashboard soon, like filtering by country, so you can examine Kazakhstan in depth if you want to. So let's conclude with some takeaways from the talk. The first takeaway is that TLS terminating Middleboxes pose serious threats to network security, even if they're not inherently malicious. The best case for end-to-end connection security is to avoid HTTPS interception altogether. But the reality is that it's sometimes unavoidable. In these cases, Middleboxes performing interception should be held to the same security standards as browsers. The second takeaway from the talk is that heuristics based on HTTP and TLS fingerprints can be effective at detecting HTTPS interception. Detecting when interception occurs is a first step to holding Middleboxes accountable. This is especially important for clients who may not even know that their connection is being intercepted, as in the case of the citizens of Kazakhstan. Finally, we encourage feedback and feature requests for our open source tool and public dashboard, so please check them out.
PRs are welcome.
PRs welcome. And with that, we can take any questions, and feel free to ask us in person or to tweet at us. Thank you.
Thanks. High five. Any questions? How are questions handled here? Do we just pick them? Do we choose an audience?
Yeah.
A mic?
I guess we have a mic.
Everyone should go up to a mic and line up and ask questions there.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, I had a question. Like, let's say you have a Firefox browser, right? And it has got all the root certificates already stored in the binary, and it can't be modified. So in that case, when you have how can you exploit this MITM if all the well-known certificates are already in the binary, and you can't add any more? You can't go and add a burp, root certificate, something like that. So then, as long as people get CSN certificates, so how can the attacker still do MITM?
So I think the question was, tell me if I misunderstood this. If a binary has a preset list of trusted root certificates, like that of certificate authorities, how could an interceptor encourage a client to install a new root certificate that could issue fraudulent certificates? Was that the question?
My question is that, let's say you don't take any other certificates. Firefox will only look at its own certificates and then the root certificate list. It will not look at any other place. In that case, somebody cannot just claim to be example.com, right? Because it has to be signed by a well-known CA.
So there's the case that on browsers, on operating systems, you can actually just change whatever root certificates you trust, and you can actually add your own. And typically applications will follow that trusted root certificate list that is implemented as part of the operating system. So it's derived from that. Okay, next question. Over there.
Hello. So in this case, I think you are detecting interception between browsers and servers. So how about server-to-server communication? How do you detect that?
That's a really good question.
So detecting server-to-server HTTPS interception?
Yeah.
So you should be able to do something similar. If it's a TLS connection, then one side has to operate as a client and one as a server. So you can, if you gather fingerprints for the client in that case, then you should be able to do something similar. If they're using, if it's HTTPS.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I'm going to go in this order. So was there someone at the mic over there? You're good? Hi.
Yeah, is there a client add-in for in the browser so that the user can detect that their connection has been man in the middle?
So this could be, one easy thing to do in the browser would be to just say, okay, we're seeing a certificate signed by something that isn't in our default list of root certificates. So to display a warning then. So that would be one thing. Or the server, after it does this, this detection could send something back to the client. But right now, so there are some ways to do this. We also have a site called mitm.watch that a client can connect to, and then the server displays whether or not it believes the connection has been intercepted.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi. Where should we deploy the detection tool?
I feel like the question first of all is where should we deploy the detection tool that we built? At least for us, where we deployed it was in our infrastructure that collects basically a sample of all of the requests inbound to our network. We use it for internal research and anonymize it, of course. But we actually use the library there to detect any patterns that could correspond to inbound connections to Cloudflare's network being monstered and middled. So something that you could use it for is if you'd like to see what inbound traffic to your server looks like and identify if it's ever been intercepted, that could be a useful place for using this tool. But I think this tool is best used in a data analysis context.
Right, and just to add, so Caddy server, which is an open source server implementation, has a version of this man-in-the-middle detection built into it. So it's different from the library that we built, but it's an earlier version based off the same research paper. So if you're deploying Caddy server, you can enable this feature as well. Yeah. So hopefully we'll develop this tool to the point where it's just easy to incorporate into normal server software.
Thanks.
Great. Next question. Do we have anyone at the microphone over there? Okay, so this microphone.
First off, congratulations on graduating, Luke.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. Hi, David.
Hi. So the graphs that you showed about percentage of interception, was the denominator connections or devices? And assuming that it was connections, do you think that that's more or less or equivalently like interesting to devices? Like, do we know if the behavior of the devices that are being intercepted lead to perhaps more TLS connections? So it's really like a small number of devices that accounts for a large amount of bandwidth, or?
So you're asking if we think the breakdown of connections is for like of all the requests that we get?
Yeah, well, were the graphs, was there a breakdown of connections or a breakdown of devices? Like, what's your denominator in that graph?
Oh, it's breakdown over total connections.
Yeah, over total connections is
Okay,
17%.
and then assuming that, do you think that the devices that are being intercepted have basically similar number of connections to non-interception devices, or is this perhaps inflating or deflating the relative actual like amount of devices or people being intercepted by looking at it at connections instead of devices?
Yeah, so it does. Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, it does look like certain devices are intercepted more than others. There's a lot of variance here, and you can check it out on the dashboard. We haven't done a lot of digging to see exactly which devices are the most intercepted and stuff. So that's some future stuff that we think would be really interesting.
Thank you.
Great. I think we have connections in all three microphones, so I'll go in this queue again. Are you asking a question? Oh, we're cut off. No more questions.
We're cut off
Sorry.
time, so please come find us afterwards.
Like tweet at us or talk to us. We'd be happy to answer them in person.
Thank you.
Thank you.